Hey everyone, and welcome to the new Viper demo. So this is really getting close to what the official product is actually going to look like. So I'm really excited to show it off now. So I just want to kind of give a quick overview for anyone that's new. ViperCharts is an entirely new open source charting platform and framework built from scratch for the web browser. It's built in JavaScript. The aim of it is to replicate TradingView's really powerful user interface and user experience, while also focusing on cross-market and exchange data comparison. Currently, Viper is still in these early stages, but we are currently transitioning from a closed alpha into a private paid beta, and this is one of the first steps. Our mission at Viper is to create an ecosystem of standardized APIs so that traders and data enthusiasts have a single platform for visualizing and comparing data across exchanges, markets, and ecosystems. TradingView, being a centralized company, will never be able to offer all the data that the customers would want. If you want to compare Bitcoin's intraday price action against an order book heat map from a small decentralized exchange, you'd either have to switch between multiple tabs or build your own front end to load the data from the two separate sources. With so much data out there, there's got to be a different way. On our own at Viper, we can't afford to track all the data out there, of course. But that's where the beauty of open source and the free market come in. In Viper, the community will be able to collect and sell access to their own data sets via the provider API or the provider specification. With these new tools, Viper will totally live up to the phrase built by traders for traders. So once you just inch, so once you go ahead and load up Viper, you're going to be greeted with a empty screen. And this is where you're going to see your controls up here at the top app bar. You're going to see the name of the chart, the time frame selected. You'll have this grid locked button, which you can toggle between grid edit mode and grid locked, which we'll get into later. You'll have the traditional kind of time scale at the bottom, and it'll show the selected price. When you have nothing plotted, there's not going to be a visible max and min range like there would be on TradingView. So you can see there's no line that's horizontal or any data here. So what we can go ahead and start by doing is actually getting in and plotting some data. Now, traditionally, we go to plot data, and we would be able to basically choose what data set we wanted to plot, whether it be Bitcoin perp or something else. So we can go ahead and do that. So now what there is instead of traditional single indicators, we've gone ahead and upgraded the entire system to dataset groups. So we'll go ahead and explain what that is. We're going to start by creating a new group. So now in dataset groups, we get to choose what data set that we want to pull data from. So in this case, Viper is providing all of these data sets, which are essentially like near perp on FTX, and within that data set has some data models. So essentially, a data set is just a group of data models. Um, so here on FTX near perp, we have price, open interest, funding rate, predicted funding rate, and volume by side. So if we go ahead and go in here and we want to plot some data, we can see now we have those same data models up here. We can select between them. So I can see I have price selected, and now I see all the indicators that I could possibly be able to plot with price from near perp. So there's a specification that says what FTX near perp has in terms of data models, and each data model is specifying what indicators are parsable with this. If we switch between price and funding rate, we can see that the indicators actually change a little bit. Now, most of them are compatible, but candlesticks are actually not compatible with funding rate, and that's because funding rate, the data that's collected on our server side, is actually only the close of funding rate, versus predicted funding rate is a candlestick base. If we go to volume, there's only one indicator currently supported with volume, and that's volume by side, which is just your traditional volume bars. So we can go ahead and plot the candlestick for price for near perp, and we're currently on the hourly time frame, and this is our chart. Whenever we resize the range, more data is loaded, and you can see up here that there will be a loading progress bar that finishes when the loading and calculations are done. So yeah, we can go ahead and resize the range vertically like this, just like you could do on TradingView. You can resize the horizontally like this. You can reset the view, the time view by double clicking. You can reset the Y view by double clicking as well. You also have some new type of zoom features that we can do. So we've tried to really focus on the user interface and user experience of the app, because while the app has always been pretty pretty feature packed. It has definitely suffered from user experience issues, making the app just really unusable in real life. Now I feel like we've really solved a lot of those issues. There's still room to grow, but there's a lot of issues have been solved. So one of the first things we can do is now when you zoom in and out, you can actually zoom in on whatever time is selected. This is much like trading lights zoom in feature. So instead of just zooming in, originally we just zoom in on the side of the chart like on TradingView, you can zoom in on different charts. Now if you actually hold shift while zooming, this will zoom in and out on just the Y scale. So much like how when you traditional zoom, it's only zooming the time scale. When you hold shift, it actually inverts that logic and instead only does the Y scale. Now, if you ever want to reset the chart, of course, you can come here. But what you can also do is if you mess with the chart a little bit or whatever, you can actually right click and you can reset the scale, which will reset this scale. And then I can also right click and click reset chart view, which resets everything. It resets whatever you do here. If you drag away, it just resets the chart to the default state if you had initially loaded it. And there's also some other things like full screen, which we'll get into later, delete layer and delete chart, which we'll get into later, of course. Also, over here, if you right click the Y scale, you can switch between different types of different scales like you can on TradingView, which we have the default chart, we have percent, we have normalized, which doesn't change the data here. It makes no sense to use it on a chart where you're plotting one thing, but when you want to do data comparison, these tools are very useful. So once again, we'll get into that. The other zooming feature that we have available is control zoom, which if I go ahead and remove this and instead plot, one thing that's very unique here is that all these data sets on FTX, we're only tracking FTX perpetual markets right now, but under the under Bitcoin, we're actually tracking the footprint, which is volume by price. So we can actually see we have an extra data model here that we can select. This is only available for Bitcoin right now on FTX. And I can either plot the footprint, which is a baseline indicator, or there's these other indicators which plot the data differently. So I could use something like volume profile session, which is generally for higher time frames, because the data is basically the width of the volume profile is based on the width of the time, versus if I was to add something like the traditional footprint, you're going to notice that the data is much more noisy. That's because the volume profile session, if I switch to the lower time frame, footprint is built for lower time frames to much more easily visualize liquidity and clunks of selling, clusters of selling. As you can see here, you can see that the width of the sell and buy volume is basically it's based absolutely. So that means that it's not going to resize like on the volume profile session to where it's only like the size of, it's only the max width is of the bar. So that's something that's important to know if you're going to use the footprint chart on Bitcoin, which we do suggest you use. So what's next? So the next zooming feature, the final one, is control plus zoom. And this allows you to zoom in on a specific part of the chart and then start dragging it. So control zoom actually zooms you into a specific point. So if we actually go back and we re-add the footprint, the traditional footprint, and then we remove that volume profile session, we go to 1 minute, we reset the chart view, and I zoom out. Maybe I want to zoom out and see some more data, but I actually want to, I want to zoom in on that spot. Now it can get a little laggy, especially on the footprint chart on the 1 minute because there's just so much data, but I can actually zoom in, I can control zoom out. If I want to zoom in there just to see how much volume was there, I can then go ahead and now I can add another indicator. Okay, well, I want to actually visualize like how much volume was there per tick. So we can go to footprint, and one of the indicators that parses the footprint data is the volume per tick. Now if I add this to the chart, it's gonna, if I reset the view, it's gonna plot down here. So that's one thing that Viper doesn't do, and this is a key distinction. Because Viper's API is trying to be pretty unopinionated, it's not like TradingView where indicators specify whether something overlays the chart or goes onto a separate chart. In Viper, we have added a layer system. So previously, if you wanted to have data below this, you'd actually have to come in here and you'd have to add a separate chart. You'd have to sync the time frames. Then you'd have to go in, you'd have to, this is such a terrible user experience. So we got rid of this. And what we did was we finally decided to bite the bullet and add an overlay, a layer system. So if you add an indicator and then we go to footprint, you can see that this new button is here called off chart. So this allows you to plot data off of the main chart. So this is the main layer, and if we go to volume per tick, instead of clicking on it, traditionally we go to off chart, and now we can plot it. Now the cool thing about this off chart button is that because on one hand, it's like if we plot something like Bollinger Bands width, which should be plotted off the chart always, you know, it might get a little annoying because you're plotting it on the chart and you don't want to do that, so you got to remove it and you got to go back and re-add it, blah, 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 blah. But it means that you can do so much more custom stuff. Like you could even do Bollinger Bands plotted off chart, like traditional actual Bollinger Bands, which is so stupid. You would never want to do that. But the fact that you can do that is what we're trying to embrace. We're trying to embrace the freedom and unopinionatedness as much as possible, so that way people can come in and when they add their own indicators, their own data sets, they're not constrained by our assumptions, which I think is one of the hardest one of the more important things that we're trying to focus on. So if we go ahead and get rid of the Bollinger Bands, now we can zoom out and we can go back to that time and we can go ahead and control zoom in right there. And you'll notice that this layer stays like fixed in terms of, oh, well, I just zoomed in on that. But if I zoom in here, if I control zoom in here and resize the layer, this is not resizing in the same way. It's just zooming in on the time axis, but the price axis is staying regular. So you can see that relative to everything else, there wasn't actually that much volume per tick. There was quite a lot of volume by volume delta per tick, as you can see here. So some sellers are getting absorbed, but not anything to really write home about. But there was quite a lot of selling here that just got continually rewarded. We can go ahead and reset the chart view. So that's that. Now, if we wanted to switch markets, so in TradingView, of course, you can just start typing, and you can easily switch from Bitcoin to Ethereum to Solana to whatever other thing you wanted to plot. Now, in Viper, previously, you couldn't do that. In fact, previously, one of the issues with Viper is that there's no idea of I'm looking at a market. You know, if you go to TradingView, the chart that you have is always tied to a market. One chart, one market. Yes, you can compare data by adding it to the chart, but at the end of the day, if you're looking at a Bitcoin chart, you're looking at a Bitcoin chart. Viper does not do that. And once again, this comes down to we're trying to create an unopinionated API. We're just trying to create a charting library, or charting ecosystem, a charting framework, I should say, a charting framework that is just focused on displaying the data that you give it. And on top of that, the idea is that the UI is designed to create a better user experience. So rather than this kind of being manipulated in a way that we expect people to use it, the UI is doing that, which I think is a key distinction. It might sound like it doesn't matter or make a difference, but I think in terms of use cases, it does. So actually, what we could do is we could go ahead and start typing. So if I start typing, oh look, we bring up this change dataset modal. So now there's a new modal that we've added that allows you to quickly change what market you're looking at. So if we go ahead and switch to Atom Perp, we've gone ahead and you can see Atom Perp up here. Now the one thing is though, is that because, like I said earlier, if we start typing again, Atom Perp doesn't support footprint, while Bitcoin does. So that means none of these indicators that we have, they're all based on the footprint data model. Well, Atom doesn't support that. So that means that we're not going to be able to display that stuff. So we can go ahead and remove that. And instead, we can go ahead and add indicators. Now, how do I add an indicator to an existing dataset group? Well, there's a couple ways. One, you could go through here and now, hey, there's our dataset. You can click on it. Press escape to close the modal. We don't need to do it that way. You can also come here and highlight over the name of the dataset group and click add indicator. You can also change the dataset and that opens the modal that we previously looked at. If you right click and click add indicator, now we have the same modal popped up and I can go ahead and re-add the candlestick price. And there we go, there's a candlestick price. We can switch to the 15-minute or the hourly time frame. Another way you can quickly add an indicator is you can press slash. And I believe that's the same key as on TradingView. So that's the slash button, which is right next to the right shift key on most keyboards. And now we can quickly add an SMA. We could add a moving average slope, Bollinger Bands off that. Then we could maybe come in here and we'll say, I want to add a predicted funding rate delta bars, which are just the traditional funding rate bars you might see on like Coinalyze or something. And here we go. Here's my chart. So now I'm looking at Atom Perp. looking at all this data. Cool, cool, cool. Can move around the range. Now I want to quickly switch. Oh, I saw something on Solana. I got a notification. All right, let's click switch. Sol perp. Press tab, press enter. Boom, Solana. We're back on Solana. Now if I want to switch to Bitcoin for some reason, let's switch to Bitcoin. And boom, we're looking at Bitcoin. And I can hide some indicators. If I hide an indicator that is on the main chart, it hides the actual indicator, recalculates the range. But what I can do is I can also hide an indicator that happens to be a layer, and that layer will disappear. I can then also remove one and then re-show one, all that stuff. So that is a big thing now, is that the change in the user experience is it allows us to switch between markets so much faster. Now, the thing is, well, how does it actually know? How does Viper know what market we're selected? Because that's something that's really key. Is that, like I said earlier, TradingView charts. The key distinction is that they have a specific market that you're looking at. You're either looking at Bitcoin or you're looking at the SPX or whatever. You can compare data all you want, but at the end of the day, you're looking at a single market. Now, Viper does something interesting, which I actually think previously the system we had with Viper was terrible. It made it just worse. It made it avoiding the single market chart idea worse. Now with the new implementation, I actually think our implementation is actually better. And I'm going to explain how it works. So I can come in here and I can say, I want to add some more data. So I'm going to come here, plot data. I want to make a new group. And I'm going to say, I want to add Atom Perp, Open Interest, SMA. Because I can add an SMA. Oh, I don't want that off chart actually. So I'm going to go ahead and remove it and then come back, and then I want to re-add it and say I want it on chart. Well, now it's here. Well, of course, the open interest is a bit higher than Bitcoin's actual traded price, so I can go ahead and right-click the scale, and I can change it to percent, or more specific, I'll change it to normalized. Now, this isn't super useful, but as we add more data, you might have Bitcoin perp, where you have the candlesticks priced, and then maybe you add a new data set group, which ends up being Coinbase USD, Coinbase Bitcoin USD, and you add the heat map, or whatever other data you might want to plot. Well, now what I can do is you can see this green line right here that's next to my dataset group. If I go like this, you can see there's a green line next to my dataset group for Bitcoin perp. So when you have dataset groups, there is a single selected dataset group at a time. And that is the market essentially that you are selected, like in TradingView. So if I press Shift and 2, I have now selected the second dataset group as my selected one. So if I go ahead and start typing link perp, boom, that open interest thing has just switched to link perp. Now if I go Shift 1, that takes me back to Bitcoin. I can go ahead and start typing ADA perp, switch all this up to ADA, and boom, now I'm quick switching between my selected dataset group. This user experience is so much faster. It's going to make cross-market data comparison just so much faster, so much easier. I mean, I I honestly can't contain my excitement. Like, I'm so excited to get this in people's hands, and I'm so thankful that you guys have been waiting patiently. I know it's been a while, but yeah, I just can't wait to see how people start using this as we add more data, more features. I mean, it's getting so close to being legit now. There are still some bugs that we got to kink out, but I think overall what we're offering is getting really close to like a legitimate, really, really good product, and I'm very, very happy about that. But yeah, so now we can go ahead and you can actually hide an entire dataset group that hides all the layers and all the data. I can go ahead and shift back to Shift 2, and then I can start typing, hey, I want to, I don't know, ETH perp. Let's switch to ETH perp, and let's add some more data. Like, let's compare the predicted funding rate, SMA. Oops, I have a habit of pressing off chart. Let's compare the funding rate SMA of open interest SMA on a normalized chart. This is stupid. What am I doing? But this is so cool. You can see there's actually kind of some correlation. That's actually interesting. I've never done that before. It seems like whenever one swings up, the other swings up. I mean, they're not correlated directly, I'd say. They're more so derivatives of similar style of aggressiveness, I would say. But see, I think I might be the first person to ever look at a normalized open interest SMA and predicted funding rate SMA chart ever in the history of Ethereum, at least. Maybe not Bitcoin, but so So yeah, and then I can reopen AdaPerp and boom, and now I have an absolute mess of data. So let's get rid of Ethereum. Boom, got rid of the layer, gets rid of all the sub indicators. Let's go ahead and let's add another something. I don't know. Let's add volume by side. So now we can look at volume by side, which I can go ahead and plot off chart because it's volume. I don't want it on chart. If I add it on chart, it'll um, not show apparently. Oh, because it's at 0. So that's, yeah. So now I can see the volume here. And oh, I gotta switch this from normalized to default. That's why it was breaking. So that's definitely why. Okay. So currently bars don't work on percent or normalized charts. That's one thing that we have to kind of fix. I don't think it's really a bug necessarily. It's more so just a weird thing. But yeah, so looking at volume here, we can see we have volume by side. So this shows the total amount of volume traded in this amount of time. The color is based on the volume delta. So you can see actually this is a green candle. If I remove all this other garbage, to be honest. This is a green candle, but the volume is red, and that's because there was a more amount of market selling than there was actual market buying here. So this indicator can show you a little bit of like a like this is a 1-minute chart actually, which is kind of surprising. So that's a really big delta for 1 minute. Actually, it's not super huge for a 1 minute. On an hourly, which I can't switch the hourly. Okay, I'll have to refresh. There are still a few bugs, like I said. So now we're on the hourly chart. Let's see if we could find a volume delta. Here. More market buying in this candle. Not a ton more, but, a bit more, even though the candle's red. So that's volume by side. If we get rid of that, and let's see, what other indicators do I want to add? Okay, so one little thing that I want to quickly go over. A big thing that, a big distinction is that, not distinction, but I think something that we've really found is that originally in most charting platforms, when you want to plot like price, you just go in, you can plot whatever indicators you want for price. But if you want to plot open interest ends up being listed as its own indicator here. And when I was implementing the datasets system specification, I was like, it doesn't make sense that you'd have an indicator just for open interest when open interest is just a candlestick. It doesn't make sense that you'd have predicted funding rate plotted as just delta bars if the data isn't really based on delta bars, it's just a data set. And then I realized, wait a minute, what if you had a data set and then you had data models and each data model fit a specific model that indicators could then basically say, hey, I can parse that model. And that's what's happening here. That's why when we switch from price to funding rate or price to open interest or to predicted funding rate, we can see the same indicators are selected because the data model is the same. So if I plot the candlestick of predicted funding rate, and I hide this because funding rate's way less than AdaPerp's actual price, you can see the actual candlestick. It's just a candlestick. If I go ahead and I add more stuff, I want to add predicted funding rate, I can do an SMA, I can do an MA slope, I can do Bollinger Bands, I can do Bollinger Bands width, I can do the delta bars, I can do whatever I want because all of this is parsable because predicted funding rate in the standardized API for Viper is specified to be an OHLC model, meaning open, high, low, close. So that means that if I just go ahead and remove all this data and I just go back to the indicators, that means that any indicator that says that it takes OHLC data, open interest matches that model, price matches that model, predicted funding rate matches that model. I can imagine anything else that you wanted to add as custom data sets or that we added in the future, anything that's OHLC based will be parsable by all the indicators that are OHLC based. So this means that as we, the developers, and as people, once we create an ecosystem and start opening it up to people, as people build more things, you can have an instance where Alice makes an indicator that consumes OHLC data, and he's making it for the crypto space to test, take some OHLC data from, like, let's say, an Ethereum DEX and parse it in some way that displays, like, trading signals or whatever. and that person only expected it to be used in like on an Ethereum DEX, and someone else comes in. So Alice did that. Bob comes in and builds his own data set for tracking traditional finance stuff and tracks the Dow Jones and all this stuff. And all his data is OHLC based. That means that when he puts it into Viper, if he's subscribed to Alice's indicators, that means he can actually use her indicators with his data set. And if someone else like Gene is subscribed to both Alice and Bob's dataset indicators and dataset group respectively, he can use those things in tandem, having paid or gotten access or whatever, however he went about it, to those two things, even though those two people have never even met, even though they didn't plan it out. Because of the Viper specification and what we're trying to build, this will create such a exponential growth in the potential combinations of data and data display methods, because we're focused on creating a specification as well. So right now, I think it's somewhat apparent the value proposition of this or the potential of this, but I think in the future, as more people start coming into the ecosystem, it's going to be very, very apparent how powerful that's going to be. So that is such a big thing that we've added, that we figured out, and I'm super proud of it. I'm super happy to showcase it off, and I hope people understand what I'm talking about when I say how big of a deal that is. Because right now, with one data set, with one provider, aka me, ViperCharts, it's not that important. But when more people start coming in, it's going to be a big deal. So, and if we look at that, open interest is OHLC based. Funding rate is value based, because funding rate only reports one value per time. So open interest has OHLC, which is open, high, low, close, same with price and predicted funding rate. But funding rate on our servers is only tracked as one value per time, and that's mostly because funding rate only updates once per hour. So storing OHLC data of it would be pretty wasteful. It could, but we just didn't feel like it was needed, considering predicted funding rate is available too. So yeah, and then another data set example would be volume by side. So volume by side is a data model of type volume by side, which is a native Viper model. And if we switch to BTC and we go ahead and add a new indicator, footprint is of type footprint. So there's footprint. And in the future, if we go ahead and we change this data set to Coinbase, you can see there's order book heat map, which is a specific type of order book heat map in Viper with nothing implemented yet, because the order book heat map is not implemented. Now we are currently tracking Bitcoin, USD, Coinbase heat map data, the historical order book heat map, but we don't have it implemented currently. So the data's been being tracked, but there's no way to load the data into Viper just yet. So yeah, so if I go ahead and I re-add candlesticks, SMA, whatever I want to do, boom, there we go. So that's that. The next thing, one of the final things, is going to be the templates tab. So templates have been added, and this is mainly so that way it's much more easy for you guys to get some idea of what you can do with Viper. So we can start with the Bitcoin high time frame template. We select it, page reloads, loads the settings. In the future it won't reload, but this is obviously a very early build. Templates were literally just added like a week ago, so that's why. And now we're looking at a volume profile chart for Bitcoin. And we can see the SMA here, the footprint, open interest candlesticks, predicted funding rates, actual reported funding rate, and or actually, well, yes, it's still a predicted funding rate. And then volume per tick. And this shows us basically how much volume occurred by side per each tick. Now the thing is, it's not actually per tick, it's actually times the amount of total volume in the candle. So it's not like there was 100,000 or $1 million per tick here of buy volume. It's actually, the number isn't super useful. It's more so just, it's more of a visual indicator rather than an actual analytical, like statistical indicator. So just keep that in mind if you do start using it, which I do recommend you do. It can be useful on lower time frames for spotting tops and bottoms. So you can see here, there's just an incredible amount of, wow, there's a big freaking single buy there, it seems, by someone, relative to everything else. And then a couple, like a sell there, and then a sell there and whatnot. So you can kind of visualize absorption a bit better. Now, if we go to a higher time frame, like the 15-minute, it's not as useful because there's more values are more averaged out, less chaos. Um, but yeah, so I don't know if there's much else I could really talk about. Oh yeah, the template. So yeah, this is one of the templates. So there's a single market template. And then there's a multi-market template, which is one of these, which is the relative price chart. So this is the type of chart that I really like to use for looking at what markets I should be looking at. So near perp seems to be holding the strongest since beginning of April 7th. So for the last week or so, near perp seems to be holding the most, whereas Luna and Looks seem to be kind of taking down the shitter. But yeah, so yeah, and if I do the shift 2, shift 3, you can see that I'm selecting different data sets. Now, one thing about this chart is that I think in the future we're actually going to have a different type of data set group that you're going to be able to add. Because when you have a chart with a bunch of stuff plotted like this, and there's only one indicator per group, it almost makes sense to do like an indicator group rather than a data set group. So I'm imagining that you could actually come in here and you could say, instead of creating a new group, like a data set group, you could say, I want to create a new indicator group, and then you create an indicator that has children with child data sets versus a data set group with child indicators. I think it would make this kind of chart it would make it much easier to build, because right now if you want to build from scratch, you have to go in, you have to click, okay, I want to add this, I want to scroll down to the data set. What was the last data set I added? Oh, it was algo. Okay, sushi. It's so annoying to build these charts. Once again, it comes down to user experience. We're going to make that better, and I think that going with adding a indicator group system would also be good. Templates. So now relative open interest percentage chart. So this is another one. So this is actually open interest rather than price. So this could be actually quite more useful because it means you can actually see where people are basically placing their bets. And it seems like Atom is something that I've been watching, where for some reason there was a huge jump, about 8% in open interest in 1 hour. And then recently there was a huge jump of about 5%. So I think someone's trying to build either a decently large short or long on Atom. And you can also see where people are leaving their money, like removing it. So if we zoom in, so I think that line is AVAX, that line. So it seems like someone went in, opened up a new position, and then closed it on, I can't tell what market that is. That's one thing that we will have to add. Oh, it's right under Luna. Ah, I can't tell. It's also black. So there's a little bug sometimes for one of the labels ends up being black. I haven't been able to figure out why that is. So we're gonna figure that out eventually. But yeah, and you can explore the rest of the templates. There's a couple more like funding rates. So this plots all the funding rates of the markets that we track. So these templates are actually built on the server side. So it takes all the markets that are available that we track for FTX. In the future, you'll have a template for you'll have FTX funding rates chart, then Binance funding rates chart. So that's something that we'll offer. Also, these templates eventually, so right now it's just templates, like static templates that we offer. But in the future, there will be, first of all, we'll offer, like I said, more templates for more markets, but also providers will be able to offer their own templates. So let's say you're a provider, you're selling access to you're tracking all the data and selling access to price action on Ethereum smart contracts or whatever, like DEXs, Ethereum DEXs, like Uniswap or whatever, and you want to offer that stuff. Well, you can actually offer your own templates along with that. It's like, hey, you made all these great data sets. You made all these great data sets and you can provide them, but hey, you want to make it easy for people to get started, add some templates, kind of like what 52 SQ, I don't know how to pronounce his name, kind of like what he does, where he offers free templates for people. We want to make an ecosystem where people can offer free their templates when they're selling access or giving access for free to their provider system. Also, you will be able to make and save templates. So ideally, you will be able to right-click and click Save Template, give it a name. The name would be up here. You'd be able to edit the name of the chart, and then save it as a template in your own custom save templates, and that'll save on the server side. But yeah, so that's about it. Like I said, you have other things. If you are plotting, let's say, a chart with a bunch of layers, you can come in and I can say, hey, I want to delete that layer. I want to full screen that layer. You can go ahead and full screen it. You can double click to toggle full screen on the layer you're looking at. rid of that. I can delete the chart. Can't actually delete the chart because there's only one chart present, so I could add another chart. Start plotting some, hey, I want to go to the 1 minute. I want to look at the footprint on the 1 minute. Get rid of grid edit mode. Boom. Now I'm looking at that. Now, hey, I'm done. I can press delete chart. Goes away. Now I'm stuck with this chart. And boom. I think that is that. There's quite a lot that we went through. It was a 35-minute recording, but there's a lot to talk about, a lot to say. And I just want to say thank you guys so much for the support, and I'm looking forward to you guys. I'm looking forward to you experimenting with the platform, exploring it, trying it out, doing whatever, and yeah. So that's been it.